Hiya friends and fans, Overly Positive Fanboy here, and it's Christmas! Alright, enough of that. It is Christmas. I am absolutely someone who really loves the holiday season, and this year one of my favouriteest childhood authors managed to release a Christmas story, so to celebrate the season, I have decided that I'm going to cover that story. This is my video on The Christmas Pig. Who are you? Jack ejaculated surprisingly. I am the Christmas Pig, oinks the Christmas Pig. I am a defender of all children's rights, including defending the Christmas spirit, in saving children from fantasy evils, reuniting them with their lost friends, and defending women's sex-based rights against predatory Change of plan. Who wants to look at the casual vacancy instead? Remember J.K. Rowling? Yeah, I wish I could forget. But before she ruined her reputation the Glinner way, she had written one of the most famous children's book series of all time. But where do you go from there? For Rowling, that answer was obvious. Realistic adult fiction. Okay. So, in 2012, she graced the world with The Casual Vacancy. But what is this book about? Well, it follows the events in a small British town after a local councillor suddenly dies of a heart attack, leaving multiple people vying for a seat on the council and exposing the various political, social, and generational divides lurking within the community. Sounds simple, right? Well, too bad, because it only gets more complicated from here. Remember how Harry Potter and the Strike novels primarily focused around one or two main characters? Here, there's like 20, with their own storylines that occasionally intersect. You have teenager Andrew Price waging war against his abusive father and crushing on the new girl at school, social worker Kay Borden trying to help out the Whedon family, Crystal Whedon trying to keep the family together by making sure her addict mum stops taking drugs, Kay's reluctant boyfriend Gavin, who resents her moving to town, Dr. Parminder Jawanda standing for the council in honour of her late friend, her daughter Sukhvinder dealing with self-harm and cyberbullying, Deputy Head Colin Wall standing for the council, his son Stuart Fatswell acting like a prick in service of some bullshit philosophy, Shirley and Howard Mollison campaigning for the removal of a council estate from Pagford Borders and the closure of an addiction clinic, their daughter-in-law Samantha feeling bored of her marriage and fantasizing about a teen boy band member. You get the idea. There's a lot of plots going on here, and some may find it difficult to keep track of it all. This isn't Rowling's thickest novel, but it's up there. Granted, there is a point to all of these perspectives, as it gives the reader an understanding of all the different viewpoints going on around the town's main political issues, and the book makes sure to flow between all these storylines at a reasonable pace. But the fact that I just waffled on about all that stuff and didn't even mention the Ghost of Barry Fairbrother post is probably a sign that maybe some of these plots could have been left out. Now, it's one thing for a novel to have a billion plots, but a reader is only going to want to soldier on if there are characters they can like and root for. So, are there any characters like that? Not really. Out of all of the people in this stupid town, I could probably count the likeable characters on one hand, and even then one of those is a maybe, and another is Howard Mollison, who's only likeable in the sense that he's fun to read, not that he's a good person. Rowling's approach to these characters seems to have been to present a really flawed look at middle to upper class Britain. That will definitely float some people's boat, but for me, I like my novels to have more than 3 likeable characters in it, and it's not particularly great to have most of them suffering the whole time. It makes the book more of a slog to get through than it should. Don't get me wrong, I could definitely sympathise with plenty of the other flawed characters, but some of them don't even qualify as flawed. The chapters focused on Fat's wall were probably the worst parts of the book because of how insufferable he was. Fairly complex narrative, tons of characters accompanying different aspects of the political divide, well fleshed out characters, even if not all of them are particularly likable. So I gotta say, there's a lot in this book that I do admire. The ending's shit though. Seriously, this book has a real downer of an ending. Granted, the climax is a masterclass in setups and payoffs, but there's no denying that the actual ending is just one bad thing after another. Sure, my favourite character Sukhvinder is in a much better place, and Howard and Shirley have ultimately had a Pyrrhic victory, but that's a small consolation given what's actually transpired to get us there. No spoilers, but seriously, it's not a fun ending. With The Casual Vacancy, Rowling presents a cynical, ugly look at the English countryside villages, but that doesn't really make me want to reread this thing over and over again, like a certain other thing she wrote. Well, that's it for the serious criticism. Now for the more subjective annoyance. You know those adult cartoons that try to be all crass in order to escape the perception of being kiddie? Yeah, this book is Rowling's equivalent of those. Remember, this is the first novel she wrote after Harry Potter, and this thing is definitely not trying to build on that audience. Characters have the biggest Salem house I've ever seen, the story is much more down to earth and boring than A Trip to Hogwarts, and the book is annoyingly horny. Seriously, we have Andrew going through teenage hormones, Fats and Crystal engaging in casual hookups, Gavin and Kay having makeup sex after arguing over their toxic relationships. I don't want sex in my J.K. Rowling stories. I want more dragons. Granted, most of these things are just character-based stuff that I can look past, but then there are times where the book itself seems to become horny. Miles and Samantha sipped their coffee, waiting for Howard to come back. Samantha's dressing gown gaped open as she sat at the kitchen table, revealing the contours of her big breasts as they rested upon her forearms. Upwards pressure made them appear fuller and smoother than they were when they hung unsupported. The leathery skin of her upper cleavage radiated little cracks that no longer vanished when decompressed. She had been a great user of sunbeds when younger. What is this, r/men writing women? Now, this may sound like a stupid criticism to have, and it is, but this is my review. My opinion is the only one that counts, and when I read a book, I'm generally not in the mood to read about how much a character wants to do the devil's tango. And while I'm here, I just want to point out that, unfortunately, there is a warning sign for Rowling's unfortunate future behaviour in here. I mentioned earlier that Sukhvinder Jawanda was self-harming because of cyberbullying, as well as just regular verbal bullying too. The main focal point of that bullying is towards her supposedly mannish appearance, which leads to Fats calling her things like hermaphrodite. Bad Rowling. Granted, this is not presented as a good thing, so I would let Rowling off the hook, but when this is first mentioned in one of Andrew's chapters, the narration says that he finds it pretty funny, but still uncomfortable, and Andrew is one of the likeable characters on my list. His regarding of transphobic bullying as funny does not make me comfortable when remembering Rowling's actual transphobia. Naughty. This may not be a deal breaker for some readers, but I wanted to warn you guys all the same. Well, I guess that's it. I'm the Overly Positive Fanboy, and I'll see you in the new year for... What? What's that? Really? Huh. Yeah, there's a TV adaptation of this thing. I don't blame you for not noticing it when it came out. I didn't notice it when it came out. Anyway, The Casual Vacancy was released in 2015 as a BBC-HBO co-production. Like all adaptations of Rowling's work, it's pretty much perfectly cast and has quite a bit of fat trimmed off. In fact, this show has a lot of fat trimmed off of it. Remember all those plots I described earlier? Yeah, most of them are gone. All that's left is Kay and Crystal, Crystal and Fats, Andrew, Howard and Shirley, Colin, and not much else. Samantha's in here too, in a fairly significant role, but her plot has pretty much been changed completely. Now, instead of fantasizing over some boy band member much younger than her, She's just trying to get her husband to have any kind of sex with her, while also squabbling with Shirley over custody of her children. So with her, we have a character who is a faithful adaptation, even though her storyline is completely different. Weird. One thing I do like about the show is that we get to see what Barry Fairbrother was like for about 15 to 20 minutes before he dies, rather than relying entirely on flashbacks. However, I'm torn over whether this show should have had more episodes in it or not. On the one hand, a longer episode count would have given the story more room to breathe and maybe throw in some of the other plots for good measure. On the other hand, I can't really imagine anyone sticking around for longer than 3 episodes for this story. Then again, maybe I'm just annoyed that my favourite character, Sukhvinder, was reduced to an extra with no lines until the very end, while the show gave more screen time to fucking Betty! So, yeah, this is a pretty decent adaptation of the book, if a little bare in comparison, and it changes the ending to make it less of a downer too. So that's a win in my book. Are we done now? Good. Well, that is it, my friends. I am the Overly Positive Fanboy, and I look forward to seeing you again in the new year.